The sun had just risen over Crescent Ridge, casting a golden glow over the tree-lined jogging paths that wove through the quiet upscale neighborhood. Birds chirped in the crisp morning air, their melodies blending with the faint rustling of leaves. The scent of dew lingered, refreshing and unspoiled. For Sophia Lawson, this was the best time of the day. Dressed in a sleek, black athletic set, her wireless earbuds snugly in place, she jogged along the familiar route at a steady pace, her breathing rhythmic and controlled. These early morning runs were her sanctuary, a rare moment of solitude before the chaos of the day began. At 39 years old, Sophia had climbed to one of the highest positions in law enforcement, the head of internal affairs for the state police department. Her career had been built on integrity, holding officers accountable and rooting out corruption wherever it was hidden. It wasn't an easy job. It made her powerful enemies. But Sophia never wavered because she believed in justice. Moving to Crescent Ridge had been a decision made for peace, not prestige. Away from the noise of the city, this was a place where she could exhale, where she could just be. She focused on her steps, letting the world fade into the background as her favorite podcast on law enforcement reform played in her ears. But then, her concentration broke. A slow-moving police cruiser crawled along the edge of the jogging path, its presence unsettling. Inside the vehicle, Officer Daniel Reese gripped the steering wheel, his expression hardening as his gaze locked onto Sophia. Something about the sight of her, a black woman jogging alone in this predominantly white neighborhood, didn't sit right with him. Daniel had worked this area for years and considered himself its gatekeeper. Raised by a father who had been a high-ranking officer, he had been taught that authority wasn't just a responsibility. It was a tool to maintain order, his version of the order. And in his mind, Sophia was out of place. His gut twisted with a familiar, baseless suspicion. Maybe she was casing the neighborhood. Maybe she wasn't who she claimed to be. He didn't need proof. He just needed a reason. With a flick of his fingers, Daniel turned on his lights and pulled the car to a stop, right in her path. Sophia's pace slowed, a sharp frown crossing her face as she pulled out an earbud. She had seen this before, felt it before, and she already knew exactly how this would go. But Daniel Reese had no idea who he was dealing with. This moment is already striking a chord, isn't it? If you believe stories like this need to be heard, hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe, because what happens next will leave you speechless. The red and blue lights flashed against the pavement as Sophia Lawson came to a complete stop, her pulse steady despite the sudden shift in the atmosphere. She exhaled slowly, shoulders squaring as Officer Daniel Reese stepped out of his patrol car. His uniform was pressed, his badge gleaming under the morning sun. But his expression carried something sharper, authority mixed with unearned suspicion. "Hey, you!" His voice was clipped, carrying over the quiet jogging path. He pointed directly at Sophia. "What are you doing here?" She blinked, momentarily stunned by the sheer audacity of the question. Sophia had spent her entire career studying the exact type of officers standing before her now. The ones who didn't need facts, just an excuse. She gestured to her athletic gear, the water bottle strapped to her waist, her tone calm but firm. "I'm jogging." Daniel's expression didn't shift. "Don't get smart with me," he snapped, stepping closer. "We got a report about a suspicious person matching your description. Trespassing, possibly involved in theft. Care to explain yourself?" Sophia inhaled slowly, steadying herself. She had been through this before. Different places, different faces, same story. "I live 2 blocks from here," she said plainly. "This is my normal running route." Daniel folded his arms, his skepticism deepening. He didn't believe her. He didn't want to believe her. "You got any ID on you?" Sophia sighed. "No. I wasn't expecting to need it for a run." Daniel smirked, as if he had caught her in a lie. "Convenient. So, no proof you live here, no ID. You know what that looks like, right?" A few onlookers had gathered at a safe distance, their phones subtly raised, recording the exchange. Sophia glanced at them, understanding that this was no longer just about her. This was now a scene, a moment that could define careers or end them. She met Daniel's gaze, her voice steady but edged with warning. "Officer, I'd advise you to think carefully about what you're doing." Daniel scoffed, mistaking her calm for defiance. "Oh, is that a threat? You think you can intimidate me?" His hand moved toward his belt, toward his handcuffs. "Turn around," he ordered. "Hands behind your back." Sophia remained still, her voice lowered, calm but resolute. "Officer, I'm telling you right now, back off. You have no idea who I am." But Daniel wasn't listening. His grip closed around her wrist, twisting it behind her back. And that was his first mistake. They say power reveals a person's true nature. Daniel Reese just made a choice that will change his life forever. If you believe this kind of injustice needs to be exposed, share this video, leave a comment, and hit subscribe. Because what happens next, you won't want to miss it. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. The onlookers, phones raised, captured every moment as Sophia Lawson stood firm, her expression unreadable even as Officer Daniel Reese tightened his grip on her wrist. "You're making a scene," she said, her voice measured. "You made the scene?" Daniel shot back, pulling out his cuffs. "All you had to do was cooperate." Sophia tilted her head slightly, watching him with the kind of patience that only comes from knowing how this would end. "Officer," she said slowly, her voice carrying weight. "You're about to regret this." Daniel scoffed, snapping the cuffs onto her wrists. "Yeah? We'll see about that." He reached for his radio, exaggerating his voice. "This is Officer Reese. I have a suspect detained, violently resisted arrest. Requesting backup." A gasp rippled through the crowd. "Violent? She didn't do anything," shouted a young man. "Yeah, we got it all on video," a woman added, shaking her phone. Daniel ignored them, waving them off. "Clear the area. This is a police matter." Sophia exhaled slowly as she was pushed toward the patrol car. She had seen officers like him before, ones who thought their badge was a shield from accountability. But that was his second mistake. She lowered herself into the back seat, her posture calm, her presence unsettling. Daniel slammed the door shut, turning to the crowd. "Get back," he ordered, masking his nervousness with forced authority. But as he slid into the driver's seat, he finally looked into the rearview mirror. And there she was, Sophia, watching him, her lips curled into the faintest smile, as if she already knew something he didn't, as if she had already seen how this would end. Daniel's grip tightened on the wheel. He had won, right? Right? Power unchecked always collapses under its own weight. Daniel Reese doesn't realize he just lit the match that will burn everything down. If you're ready to see what happens next, hit like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. The real reckoning? It's just beginning. The ride back to the precinct was quiet, at least on the surface. But inside the patrol car, Daniel Reese could feel the weight of his actions pressing against him. Every so often, he flicked a glance at the rear-view mirror, expecting to see fear, anger, something. But Sophia Lawson just sat there, perfectly still, her face unreadable. That smile, It wasn't a smirk. It wasn't smug. It was knowing, and that unsettled him more than anything else. As the car rolled through the gates of Huntington Police Department, the tension in Daniel's shoulders eased. This was his turf, his rules. He stepped out, yanking the door open. "Let's go." Sophia complied, stepping out with an unsettling calm. The station was buzzing as they walked through, officers glancing up, some whispering. She didn't belong here, they all thought. Yet, there was something about the way she carried herself, like she was meant to be here. Daniel led her to the processing desk, slamming a form down in front of the booking officer. "One for trespassing and resisting arrest," he announced, making sure his voice carried. "Got a little feisty back there." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Feisty?" Daniel ignored her, shoving her paperwork toward Officer Clark, the booking sergeant. Clark frowned, glancing at Sophia, then at Daniel. He opened his mouth to say something when the station's double doors burst open, and everything changed. Captain Maya Calloway stormed in, her heels clicking against the tile like a countdown to something inevitable. The room fell silent. She wasn't just a captain. She was the kind of woman who made men like Daniel nervous. And she was furious. "Reese," she barked. Daniel stiffened. "Captain?" Maya didn't stop walking until she reached the desk, where she slammed a tablet down in front of him. The screen played a video, his video. The arrest. The accusations. The way Sophia had remained calm, while Daniel's temper had spiraled. The footage had already gone viral. Sophia's name was in headlines. His name was in disgrace. Maya picked up the paperwork he had filed. "Trespassing," she read, her voice razor-sharp. "Resisting arrest?" She looked up, her gaze cutting through him like a blade. "Tell me, Reese," she continued. "Do you even know who you just arrested?" Daniel swallowed, his confidence wavering. She was jogging. I had reason to believe. She was jogging. Maya repeated, incredulous. "That's your reasoning?" She turned to Sophia, the fire in her eyes softening for the first time. "Sophia Lawson," Maya said, her voice steady. "Deputy Commissioner of the Huntington Police Oversight Division." The station collectively inhaled. Daniel's heart dropped. His mind raced through every interaction, every word he had said to her, and he realized he had just arrested the one person who could destroy him. Sophia took a slow step forward. "I warned you," she said quietly, her words slicing through the room. Daniel had thought this was just another routine stop. He had no idea he had just walked into a reckoning, and it wasn't over yet. Power is only real if it can stand against truth. Daniel Reese just discovered what happens when authority meets accountability. If you're ready for the next move, drop a comment, hit like, and make sure you're subscribed. Because the fallout, it's coming. The moment Captain Maya Sinclair entered the precinct, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every officer within earshot stiffened, their conversations dying mid-sentence. Even the sound of ringing phones and clicking keyboards seemed to fade into the background as she marched toward the booking desk, her jaw tight. Her eyes locked on Thomas Hale. "Hale!" Her voice was sharp, controlled, but laced with unmistakable fury. Thomas flinched but straightened his posture. "Captain," he greeted, attempting to keep his voice even, though his grip on Sophia's arm involuntarily tightened. Maya ignored the false bravado and instead turned her attention to the woman standing before her, calm, composed, still in handcuffs, but exuding an air of quiet authority that clashed with the absurdity of her current predicament. Maya's eyes darkened. "Is this some kind of joke?" Thomas blinked. No, ma'am. Trespassing and resisting arrest. His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable waver at the edges. Maya exhaled sharply through her nose, shaking her head in disbelief. Then, with slow deliberation, she reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. She tapped the screen a few times before turning it around. The video was already viral. The entire precinct fell silent as footage of Thomas's aggressive confrontation with Sophia played on the screen. The unjustified stop, the baseless accusations, the unnecessary force, the murmurs of the growing crowd capturing every detail. Maya didn't have to say a word. The evidence spoke for itself. Thomas's face drained of color. He stole a glance at Sophia, who met his gaze with the same calm she had maintained throughout the ordeal. That faint, knowing smile tugged at the corner of her lips again. Maya's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Would you care to explain why you just arrested the head of internal affairs for the state police?" The station erupted into whispers. Some officers immediately turned toward each other in shock. Others stiffened, their eyes darting between Sophia and Thomas, realization dawning across their faces. Thomas opened his mouth, then closed it again. His throat went dry. "Wait, what?" One officer muttered from a nearby desk. "She's internal affairs," another whispered, their tone bordering on disbelief. Maya's glare could have burned through steel. "Did you even bother to check her credentials, Hale?" Her voice was low, furious. Thomas's mouth felt like sandpaper. He scrambled to salvage what little was left of his position. She had no ID. She was acting suspicious. Maya's expression turned cold. "Suspicious?" she echoed, voice dripping with contempt. "Suspicious because she was jogging? Suspicious because she didn't immediately bow to your authority? Or was it something else?" "Officer Hale." A heavier silence followed. The implication was clear. Thomas swallowed hard. The weight of the eyes on him, his colleagues, his superiors, even the officers he had once barked orders at, pressed down like 1,000 bricks. Maya didn't wait for him to answer. She turned to the desk sergeant. "Get those cuffs off her. Now." The sergeant scrambled to comply, fumbling with the key as he unlocked Sophia's restraints. The moment her wrists were free, she flexed them slightly, rolling her shoulders before casually smoothing the sleeves of her jacket. Sophia met Thomas's panicked gaze one last time before turning her attention to Maya. "I'll leave this in your hands for now," she said, her tone professional, though the hint of satisfaction in her voice was impossible to ignore. Maya nodded. "Oh, don't worry," she said, eyes flashing. "I'll handle it. And right now, as you witness this moment, ask yourself, how many times has injustice gone unchecked because no one spoke up? This isn't just about one officer. It's about a system that has been left unchallenged for too long. If you believe in accountability, in justice, in standing up when it matters most, then share this story. Hit the like button, subscribe, and make sure the world hears this. Because silence only protects those who abuse their power. It's time to change that. And with that, the walls around Thomas's career began to close in. Thomas Hale stood frozen, his mind scrambling for an escape route. But there was none. The station was dead silent except for the quiet murmurs of officers who had just realized the depth of his mistake. His heart pounded in his chest as he turned toward Captain Maya Sinclair, but her cold stare offered no mercy. "Captain, Maya cut him off with a sharp motion of her hand. "Save it." She turned to a nearby officer. "Pull up his record. Now." Every stop, every complaint, every report. The officer hesitated, glancing between Maya and Thomas. "You heard me," Maya snapped. Within moments, Thomas's file was displayed on the precinct's main monitor. A chilling silence settled over the room as the officers read through the reports. Pattern of disproportionately stopping Black and Latino individuals. Multiple complaints filed for excessive force. Unexplained discrepancies in his reports. Each line was a dagger to Thomas's rapidly crumbling reputation. Maya exhaled, shaking her head. How many warnings did you ignore, Hale? She didn't expect an answer. How many chances did we give you? Thomas's mouth went dry. He had no defense. The realization was settling in now. He wasn't just in trouble. He was finished. Sophia adjusted her sleeves, her expression unreadable. You saw a woman jogging in a neighborhood you didn't think she belonged in, and you made up a crime to justify your bias. You didn't check my ID because you didn't care who I was. Thomas opened his mouth, but Sophia continued, her voice unwavering. What if I wasn't in internal affairs? What if I was just another citizen? Would anyone believe me over you? She let the question linger in the air, letting its weight settle over him. Maya straightened. Hale, as of this moment, you're relieved of duty. Badge and gun now. Thomas's entire body stiffened. Captain, wait. Now, she repeated, her voice cutting through the room like a blade. His fingers trembled as he unclipped his badge, the reality of his downfall sinking in. He hesitated before placing it onto the desk, as if clinging to the last thread of his authority. He unholstered his weapon next, setting it down with careful reluctance. Maya leaned forward, her voice dangerously quiet. You'll receive official notice of your suspension, pending an internal review. But let's be real. You and I both know how this ends. Thomas felt like the walls of the precinct were closing in on him. The same officers who once nodded in respect as he walked by now wouldn't meet his gaze. The same authority he had once wielded over others had been stripped from him in an instant. Sophia tilted her head, her voice deceptively soft. I warned you. The weight of those words sent a shiver down Thomas's spine. And for the first time, he felt the fear of being powerless in a system that no longer protected him. But it was too late now. The damage had been done, and it was only just beginning. The final reckoning. Thomas Hale sat in the cold, dimly lit precinct break room, his hands trembling as he scrolled through his phone. His name was everywhere. News headlines, social media, live streams dissecting the video of his arrest. Disgraced officer exposed for racial profiling. Police corruption unraveled. Officer caught on camera. The fall of Thomas Hale. A career destroyed in minutes. Each notification felt like a fresh punch to the gut. He had spent his entire career thinking himself untouchable, protected by the badge. Now, he was nothing but a cautionary tale. Across the precinct, Sophia Monroe stood tall in front of the press, the flashing cameras capturing her unshaken presence. Captain Maya Sinclair stood beside her, arms crossed, the weight of their decision solidified in their stances. This is not just about one officer, Sophia stated, her voice echoing through the microphones. This is about accountability. It's about a system that allows abuse of power to go unchecked. That ends now. The crowd erupted into applause, journalists scribbling furiously as the press conference continued. Inside, Thomas watched from the shadows. Every word felt like a final nail in the coffin. He wanted to fight back, to argue that he was only doing his job, but deep down he knew he had done this to himself. By evening, the fallout was undeniable. The police department announced a full review of past cases under Thomas's name. Other officers who had engaged in similar practices were now under scrutiny. Policies were being rewritten. The system that had once shielded him was now turning its back. Meanwhile, Sophia's influence spread far beyond the department. She became a national voice for justice, appearing on news segments and panels discussing police reform. People rallied behind her, seeing her as a symbol of change. Months passed, and the once respected officer Thomas Hale was no longer a name of authority. It was a name of disgrace. His attempts to find work in law enforcement were met with closed doors. With no badge, no title, and no power, he was forced into a mundane job, writing parking tickets for a private security firm. One afternoon, as he stood outside a small diner, scribbling a citation for an expired meter, his eyes drifted toward the television inside. There she was, Sophia Monroe, standing at a podium, accepting a prestigious award for her contributions to justice and police accountability. The audience gave her a standing ovation. Thomas's grip tightened around the ticket pad. His jaw clenched as he watched her graciously smile, shaking hands with officials, her name now synonymous with progress. She had won, and he had lost. The memory of that morning in Crescent Ridge played over in his mind. The arrogance, the certainty that he was the one in control. He had never imagined it would end like this. And yet, here he was, just another man watching from the outside, while the world moved forward without him. Sophia Monroe stood on that stage, receiving a national award for her contributions to police reform. The very system that tried to silence her was now forced to acknowledge her. Meanwhile, Thomas Hale, once the man who thought he held all the power, watched from the sidelines, his world crumbled, his authority stripped. This moment was bigger than one mistake. It was a reckoning. And that's the lesson here. What happens when those who abuse their power are finally held accountable? This story is proof that justice can prevail, but only if we refuse to look away. So, don't let this message stop here. Share this video, subscribe, and hit the like button if you believe in real change. Because the more people who see this, the harder it becomes for corruption to hide. Justice isn't given, it's demanded.